Well, good morning, everybody. I wanted to start you off today by looking at a pretty awesome image here from CIRA. This is a part of NOAA and Colorado State University, and it's showing last Monday, not the one we just had, but the Monday previous, the derecho event and the lightning strikes that were recorded. Just amazing to see the sheer extent of that one single storm system and the damage that it did do as it rolled across parts of the I-states last week. So where are we going today? I want to talk a bit about some international weather things that are going on. I want to focus on the forecast for rainfall that's going to hit some of the wildfires in Canada. We're going to talk about the heat that's expanding in the central United States over the coming days and possibly weeks. And at the very end, I want to show you that I think there's a bit of a kind of a standing wave that is being advertised in the ocean pattern, which might dictate how August is going to go. So we'll go from this public Twitter feed from CIRA right back over to some satellite data to talk some international weather first. So there's a pretty powerful typhoon that was captured this morning with Aqua's MODIS instrument here, and it's a deep one. It's around a category 4 in strength. And if we just take a look at some radar imagery from this morning as this approaches Taiwan, extremely well-defined eye. And this isn't a year that we're expecting a lot of tropical events in the Western Pacific, but when they do occur, they're going to be, as normal, pretty strong. Now, the concern about this is kind of twofold. The first is, here's the circulation early this morning, and as you can see, it's going to move across the northern part of Taiwan and then get into mainland China. And we expect the motion of this system to continue to make its way through some very productive ag regions in China. So the flooding threat's going to be the first concern. The second might be that this particular system could find itself pushing into the North Atlantic and possibly influencing that standing wave I mentioned earlier. In other words, I think it's going to help deepen a trough that's over Alaska in the long range. Now that's pretty far out. We can currently see right now that if we just look at all of the different model forecasts from the European, the GFS, the UK Met, and the CMC, that the moisture from this and the potential track is going to spread pretty far inland into China. And as we play it forward, though, you notice that most of the model members are taking the remnants of this and pulling it into, around Beijing after going through Shandong province, getting here into parts of the North China Plain and then into the Manchurian Plain. So that seems to be pretty consistent about the overall kind of view of where this is going to go. But I'd like to take a look at it on a kind of grander stage here, just looking across the whole planet. And so the moisture that you see right in through the heavier rains, when you look at a 10-day map looking at precipitation anomaly, really just kind of shows where that heavy rain is going to go. But I like this global view because we can see a couple of other things, like how wet parts of Southeast Asia are compared to historical averages. Same thing for this surge of monsoonal moisture making it into central India. We have better chances of rain basically on a large trough of low pressure that's living here in parts of, or just off the southwestern coast of Australia. That's going to be key for their precipitation going forward. And while we're in the heart of the dry season for South America, I've got more of a discussion coming to you soon about what I think needs to be thought about with South America going forward. Now, the other big thing is going to be what's happening in the tropical Atlantic. You can very clearly see based off of the precipitation pattern that this is where our Bermuda high is living. It's quite strong. We've seen extensions of it pulling all the way into the southeastern United States. But we have not had trouble getting tropical convection off of Africa, off of the Sahel, getting into the main development region. I think the issue has been primarily with the dust and then the upper level subsidence that's sitting on this. And I've said that many times lately, so I apologize, I sound a bit like a broken record, but these are these weaker African easterly waves. See them right there? So there's a flow in the lower levels of the atmosphere, and you get convergence as you go into these troughs. And these troughs, they're kind of inverted over what you think of for like a trough that I talk about here. They bulge to the north because there's lower pressure along the equator. So what happens is every time you get a trough that comes in like this, there's mass convergence here. And that gives us rising motion and tropical thunderstorms. But this is all dry and dusty air. And there's upper level, just a lid on the atmosphere here, keeping things from exploding into, large convection. So maybe if we just look at it another way, where's all the best rising motion? Well, currently it's here. So it's over Australia, it's over Indonesia, it's over this part of Southeast Asia. And we have overall kind of just a lid sitting on this part of the atmosphere. And the way I can look at it is we can look at it in maps, or you can also look at it as a kind of a time series, a Hofmuller diagram. And so we expect that better rising motion, which is here right now, see it way up there, to just spread kind of as an upper level wave that gets over into the Caribbean and the Atlantic with time, also the Gulf of Mexico. And some of the longer range models, like the European ensemble going out here 10 days, has now begun to pick up on some better development of an African easterly wave here, and then something along the base of the Bermuda High coming into this area. And I think we just need to be watching it, because this is out there in the beginning of August when we expected for conditions just to start to improve for more tropical activity. I was using Tropical Tidbits this morning to use the European model focused on the North Atlantic, looking at low-level pressure anomalies, or low-level pressure, and winds. And what was important to note is just the size of the Bermuda High. So here it is. And then as we get out there past this weekend into early next week, there is something that I think we have to watch around July the 30th, and it's right here, okay? So this feature that I've kind of got circled here, seems to show up in the models at about a week from now, and it might roll into something here, a tropical low, as it goes over the Lesser Antilles first and the Greater Antilles second. And I know it's out there pretty far. This is basically day 7 through 10, but this is likely what the models are picking up on here. So this is the ensemble. I just showed you the operational run. So there seems to be some consistency there going on overall. And if that should get to the U.S., it's likely going to come toward Florida or get into the Gulf of Mexico, or possibly into the southeast. And as we think it through, this has been an area that just in the last 3 days has seen exceptionally heavy, but locally heavy rainfall. So we've talked about the area being a drought before that, especially this whole region. Lately, in the last about 10 days, we've just turned on the Bermuda High, pumped the moisture in, and just hammered it with very heavy, locally heavy rainfall. But spending the week down here and talking with farmers from Georgia, the issue that's going on is that this is not like just served up equitably among everyone. We've had a lot of rainfall disparity where you're getting reports of 2 to 3 inches, and you just go to the next field over, and it's fractions of an inch. And that's how these thunderstorms behave. We can see it just if we look at yesterday's satellite data. I mean, look at some of the deep convection that stretches from Virginia to North Carolina, South Carolina, back down here, all the way to eastern Texas and also over Florida. And it's the type of storm that we're seeing here, these hyper-local but super deep storms producing heavy rainfall that are going to continue to be the case. We have the system that's moving over the Great Lakes. There's the front we talked about. You can see some of the larger storms that blew up on that. There's the storms around the Four Corners Ridge. And at the very end of this, as the sun's setting, we can really get a good glimpse of how much smoke is coming from those Canadian wildfires into the central U.S. and then the new fires that have erupted here in the western United States. I was taking a closer look at both of those regions this morning. Just want to show you on satellite. A lot of storm activity, but take a look at the smoke from newer fires that we just saw erupt yesterday on satellite here. Just amazing to see that. Now, we've already been watching all week long where the smoke is expected to go, and I think the satellite data is telling us now it's going to get down into here, and then we're going to get some Saharan dust like we talked about yesterday into the southeast and also into Texas coming around the big Bermuda High. But one thing I'll be watching carefully are these large fires up in Canada. So this is the border between Alberta and British Columbia, and this fire yesterday, take a look at the size of that smoke plume. That is enormous coming off of the sequence of fires here. A couple of these put up some pyrocumulus, and just as the sun was setting, some very, very deep convection embedded within that smoke was rolling out of this part of Alberta. So important that we continue to monitor these fires, and I think the most important thing to watch is this. Today, we've got a deep trough stacked up here, and we are going to be seeing good upper level flow coming out of this part of the trough, initiating storms. Meanwhile, the ridge that's been living in the southwest is opening up, a lot of heat coming into Montana and out into the northern plains, and it's also expanding into the central plains of the United States as well. Other than that, we have another trough of low pressure that just continues to live in the Aleutian Islands, and this is where I'm concerned about the Typhoon, which is way off the page here, reinforcing this setup. Okay, reinforcing this look, which means this ridge that's been here is going to open up and really move into the central U.S. and probably stick around there, or maybe anchor into the southern plains or parts of the southwest as we go forward in time with this pattern. So that means all the excessive heat watches, warnings, and advisories, air quality issues, that are all throughout the western half of the country are likely going to be spreading into the central part of the United States as well as we get into the month of August. Now, for the most part, I have thought that a lot of August, if you were going to be along and east of the Mississippi, had better chances of being wet. I just think that if you get anywhere to the west of the Mississippi, our risk begins to increase with dryness. And that's going to be critical because the Bermuda High will certainly influence this side of the country, but I don't think it's able to return a lot of moisture into the central plains. Now, we'll still get storms that'll pop. It just happens. But the flow's too weak. The ridge is too expansive, and the models just continue to reflect that with a drier forecast. Meanwhile, we do have flooding issues going on. Parts of Texas, the Carolinas, coming out of Georgia here. We're going to have to continue to watch that as well. So to kind of put a point to this is what we're keeping an eye on. Through the rest of the day today into Thursday and Friday, that's the trough that sneaks through that part of Canada, dumping some rain, much needed rain. We then get into the weekend, and it will be a question as to whether or not this trough can also initiate storms across at the end of this weekend across the northern tier of the United States, and what it does across the central U.S. as well. Because as we enter next week, take a look at what reforms. Shortwave sneaks across the northern plains. Got to get rain out of this shortwave. We'll take a look at how and when soon as that one goes toward the Great Lakes. But the flow really retreats to the north, and by a week from now, a large ridge resurfaces centered right over Colorado. That's a lot of heat that's going to be in this part of the plains of the United States. What I notice here is that August 3rd, 4th, 5th, the jet stream has retreated very far to the north. This ridge is quite expansive, and we will likely get some ridge riding storms around this, but determining their placement today is going to be very difficult. But you can expect something in this vicinity being fed by the strong Bermuda high moisture that'll come up into this part of the country. So given all of that, let's go ahead and have a look at some of the metrics we need to keep an eye on today. Coming around the base of that trough, okay, we can see that there's the risk of strong storms from Oregon to Idaho and Montana, where the low pressure cell is moving through the Great Lakes toward parts of Ontario and Quebec. We see the storm risk here, and then the southwest monsoon. Tomorrow, this would be of course Thursday and Friday, that's the SPC outlook on the risk of some stronger storms. Let's get into the high-res models to see how this is going to play out. By this afternoon and this evening, so keep an eye here, there's the low moving into Ontario and Quebec, and you can see the storms to the south, the continual pumping of moisture producing the isolated but heavy storm in terms of rainfall across the southeast, getting up to Virginia, parts of the mid-Atlantic as well. And then the storms firing up tonight, rolling around the big southwest ridge. We're going to keep a close eye on this corridor for the risk of those stronger storms, okay? That's tonight. Getting into tomorrow morning, this is Thursday morning, Thursday midday and afternoon, and Thursday evening. Again, another day of some stronger storms here. The front sags farther to the south on isolated storms over the southeast. That's the same story. But as we work our way later in the week, the first of these lows, which moves out of Saskatchewan, this is the one that dumped all the rain up here, okay? Out of Saskatchewan into Manitoba, need to get some rain late this week, moving through the northern plains of the United States. We talked yesterday at length about this pocket. There's a pocket right in through here that's gone very dry. We need to see if this frontal boundary sweeping through there can actually produce some precip. Some of the models are suggesting that the farther east you go into the northern plains, in other words, moving over to the upper Midwest, is the better chances, but we're keeping an eye out on the possibilities here of some good rain. Outside of that, it's the same story. Storms around the southwest ridge at times. It will break down later on this weekend into early next week, but there's still storms here. There's the rain from the trough I mentioned a moment ago, and then the Bermuda high influence. That's shown in the AIFS. Here's the new NBM forecast. The NBM went much drier and through this corridor than yesterday's model runs. We've then got the WPC, and we've also got the European outlook. So we have to watch carefully for the storms once this trough sweeps through, the risk of them being strong to severe, and also locally some heavy rain. Outside of that, it's a lot of rain in the southeast with isolated convection in the west, and we'll keep an eye on the Ohio Valley and Mississippi Valley for storms as well. Here's the last model. Oh, that's 336 hours. Let's step that back a little bit. That's a 14-day forecast. I want just in 7-day forecast. Now we can compare the models a little bit easier. So that's the European, and that is the GFS. To look at the models compared to one another, take note how much wetter the GFS, which is shown in these colors, is for the frontal boundary sweeping through this area, while for much of the Midwest, the European is wetter. Same thing for the Delta. It's just always good to compare models and see how they how they stack up. It's a good day when the colors are all in here and they don't have major discrepancies. So from there, let's go and have a look at the models. I got on the left the GFS, on the right European. We've already seen through Thursday into Friday with the high-res model, but we're picking this up on Saturday here. This is the trough that snuck through this part of Canada. We're going to watch that frontal boundary here on Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and evening to possibly initiate storms in this area. It's not showing up well on the models, but you have to keep an eye on it in this pocket. Storms will blow up along the front range of the Rockies this weekend, and you can see the return of that the moisture around the Bermuda High into parts of the south and southeast. This is now getting out there to Sunday. See that front coming through here. This is this good chance for delivering rain to parts of the upper Midwest that after such a wet spring and then summer, there are pockets that have gone dry. We talked about it yesterday that need this moisture, so we'll keep an eye out on that. We can see the heavier rains moving into this place of the Ohio River Valley as well as we get into Sunday. This is Monday and Tuesday of next week. A lot of isolated storms throughout this region early next week as the front sags through. But after that, the ridge opens, the heat expands, especially into this weekend and early next week into the Central Plains, and it gets pretty hot and pretty dry there, while the weaker storm track rolls across the Canadian prairie. So maybe a better way to look at it, as I always do, is just to go to the probabilities. I like these maps. They tend to make a lot of sense to me as to just narrowing down where our best chances are. So if you're looking on the wet side of things, now we can see those three corridors that are showing up wet, plus what's going on here in parts of Alberta, which we desperately need the rainfall. That's the chance of an inch. If we step this up to 2, probably got a new model. Oh, didn't. Good. I'm early enough that we didn't get the new model run in yet. Look at that. That's 2 inches. Here's 4 inches. Very similar story to what we've had all week. And on the drier side of this is who has the highest chance of staying under 1/10 of an inch over the next 10 days. So now we can see the expansiveness of that ridge and its influence on so many people here. From there, let's go ahead and have a look at the week 2 precipitation anomalies. We're getting a pretty consistent picture overall that Mississippi River is going to be a dividing line. And you can see east of it in both models, like the CPC and the European, we get storms. And to the west of it, we're drier. And that dryness has got me very concerned because over the next 2 weeks, just take a look at this. This is a 2-week outlook through August the 7th, looking at precipitation anomalies. And we are expecting some places in through here to see almost no rain. If you don't catch a rogue thunderstorm that blows up around the ridge in here, then overall it's going to be a very hot and dry time period. The CPC updated yesterday their hazardous outlook for the very end of July and the first week of August, and now they have from the 31st to the 4th, that's a 5-day stretch, a high risk of excessive heat in the southern plains of the United States. So this is where it seems in our 3rd month of summer that we're going to be building in the greatest risk. Now, to look at how the temperatures get there, here's today's highs. It's all about Montana. It's about the West. It's about California, the Snake River Valley. Extremely hot, and some of this heat starting to bleed over into the western and high plains. Look at this. We then go into Thursday. The heat continues to spread as the trough digs into the northwest. Cloud cover and rain is what's keeping the south pretty cool. There's Friday, getting into Saturday and Sunday. Much hotter as we progress through the weekend for the central and southern plains. Heat spreads throughout the Midwest and Northeast. Getting into early next week, Monday and Tuesday continue to show the influence of that opening ridge in this area and the heat that's expected. So for Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma, several days of temperatures deep in the 90s and low 100s. Day 5 through 10 shows that spot anchor there with the heat, and day 10 through 15 continues to show so much of the western plains, the central plains, and northern plains, much hotter than climatological average. And that forecast is echoed in the European. Day 5 through 10, day 10 through 15. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this, and I want to bring up just 2 things to finish this up. First of all, I made a map of composite August 200 millibar winds. And what this means is this is deep in the jet stream. You got to look pretty high to find it in summer. And I wanted to know where it is. And what we typically get is our strongest flow over in Asia, and then a weak subtropical component that mixes with a flow that does something like that. And if you look at the composite average for August 1990 to 2023, and then look at where the models are putting the forecast by early August, there's some similarities, right? I mean, if we just focus on North America, there's this. But these winds are weaker than history, and this is larger. That ridge. So the flow coming in and over, that's what the main difference is with this pattern. And at times this ridge is now into the central plains of the US, which is why we think we see the heat. Now what I've noticed is, so just again, think about the placement of where that ridge is likely going to live into the early months of August, early days, of August. And I want to give you one last slide here. You see the ocean temperatures. We got one large area of heat here, a second one there, and a third one here, all across the northern parts of the Pacific and Atlantic. And what's happening is I think we're creating a standing wave where it's going over and over and over and over based upon these geographies of where there's heat. And the problem is if we've taken momentum out of the flow, what we have to wait on to disrupt these four centers of higher pressure: Bermuda High, southwestern US, Central Plains High, Pacific High, actually two pieces of the Pacific High here and here. I think this is going to get stuck for a little while. And if it does get stuck, the pattern I just showed you as we enter August, which we've talked about extensively this week, I think we're going to get stuck in that pattern for a while. What's going to disrupt it? Maybe a typhoon that comes over and messes with all of this, with its remnants, how it gets into the jet stream. Not the actual typhoon surviving, but the remnants, its disruptive kind of flow to change the position of the trough that'll be sitting over the Bering Sea in Alaska. Or we get something that comes up out of the Atlantic. I think it's going to be up to the tropics to be disruptive in this pattern as we go forward. So I'll be focusing a lot on that as we finish up this week and create some new ideas for the longer range forecast. But I'm going to stop it here and hope you all have a good rest of your day. I will soon be getting home from this great trip down to Florida and Georgia. Incredible conference. I've learned so much. This has been such a kind of refreshing time period for me just to rethink how things can be communicated. But I'll get back to a better recording studio and out of this tight little office with a terrible echo. So I'll talk to you all again soon, and have a good one. Thanks.